My sister banned me from going on the trip I paid for the family, so I canceled her ticket and went on vacation with everyone else without her. I'm 29 years old male and come from a relatively close-knit family. There are 3 of us siblings, me, my younger brother, who is 26, and my younger sister Bonnie, who is 24. I have a good relationship with my brother, but I've always had a somewhat complicated relationship with Bonnie. It's not that we don't get along, but she's always been a bit demanding. When we were kids, our parents tended to favor her a bit because she was the youngest in the family. Although I've tried to let it go, there have been times when her behavior has really tested my patience. Not just me, my brother also faces the same problem with her. His patience is thinner than mine, so whenever they're together, there's usually some conflict between them. Earlier this year, I received a good bonus at work. My parents' anniversary was coming up, and I thought it would be a great idea to take the family on a vacation. It had been years since we'd all gone somewhere together, so I thought it would be a fantastic way to reconnect and celebrate my parents' anniversary. I planned a week-long trip to Hawaii, covering all expenses, flights, accommodations, activities, everything. Hawaii was where my parents went on their honeymoon, so there was nothing better than giving them the chance to relive their younger days. When I announced the trip to my parents, they were thrilled. I knew they would be excited, especially about the location. I was sure my brother would also appreciate my gesture. I was only worried about Bonnie's reaction. It's hard to predict her mood. However, upon hearing about the trip, they both got excited, especially Bonnie. She started talking excitedly about everything she wanted to do and the Instagram videos she would make. I took it in stride, happy that she was excited. Everyone seemed excited, and I was glad to be able to do something nice for my family. However, that moment of happiness soon turned sour when Bonnie started insisting that she wanted to plan the vacation. I told her that since I was paying for the trip, I wanted to plan everything myself. She made a fuss about it, saying that I'm not good at planning things, so I should pass the responsibility to her. It wasn't a request, but more of a demand that I delegate everything to her. There were a couple of reasons why I wanted to do it myself. First, it was my gift. Second, I know Bonnie's extravagant choices when others are paying. She would book the most expensive things without thinking twice. I had booked everything according to my budget. Yes, she has that thing where if someone invites her, she'll order the most expensive dish on the menu. On the other hand, if she's the one inviting, it'll be something cheap like takeout. My parents tried to mediate, suggesting that if I was busy, I could ask Bonnie for help in planning the activities. I told everyone that the activities would be a surprise to keep them on their toes. Bonnie insisted on knowing them beforehand so she could shop and choose outfits suitable for the activities. I assured her that there wouldn't be anything that would catch her off guard. I had organized some surprises during the trip, like a private luau and a snorkeling adventure. It was going to be epic. The weeks leading up to the trip were exciting and exhausting. I had to buy everything. I went on a shopping marathon with my brother, while Bonnie was running her own shopping marathon. However, as the dates approached, her complaints became persistent. She was upset because I didn't let her plan. She felt excluded and accused me of trying to overshadow her. It annoyed me so much that I gave her the trip itinerary to get her off my back. Immediately, she called me furious, pointing out a few things that needed to be rearranged so everyone would feel comfortable. Her suggestions sounded legitimate, so I changed the schedule according to her recommendations. That fueled her ego. She said something like, "That's why I wanted to plan it." Attention to detail, see? This made me wonder if there was the slightest inconvenience during the trip. Bonnie would come after me with her sarcastic comments, so it was better to let her take control. That's why I gave her access to my account to make any changes. I told her not to make major changes to the schedule and not to add or remove activities. She could only reschedule them after my approval. She agreed. Immediately, she announced in the family group that she had taken over the planning of the trip and had made some changes. Some of the additions she made were pretty cool, like wearing matching outfits every day. It was fine until then. A week before the trip, I saw that she had canceled some of the activities I had booked and replaced them with ones she preferred. She also mentioned that she had made executive decisions regarding the itinerary and that everyone should follow her lead. I was furious. This was supposed to be a gift from me, and she had completely hijacked it. I called her, trying to reason with her, but she was determined. She said that since she was better at planning, I should let her handle it. I stood my ground and told her that there was no way she had done enough to sabotage my plan, and now she should step back. She accused me of being controlling and hung up. That night I received a call from my parents. Bonnie had told them everything, and they wanted to know what was going on. I explained the situation superficially so as not to ruin the surprise activities for them. I hoped they would understand, but to my surprise, they took Bonnie's side. They said that since she was so excited about the trip, I should let her have some control over it. They seemed not to understand that she had completely taken it over and ignored my efforts and money. They said it didn't matter who planned it or who paid. The fact is, we're family, and we should have a good time together in Hawaii. I felt frustrated and unappreciated. In a moment of anger, I wanted to cancel the entire trip, but I calmed down and took a step back. I didn't cancel the trip, but I stopped participating in the planning. I thought that if Bonnie wanted so much to be in charge, she could take over. I could sit back and enjoy, even if it wasn't the trip I had imagined. However, things took a turn for the worse 2 days ago. We were ready to leave tomorrow. I received a notification that my tickets had been successfully canceled. I was like, what the hell? I immediately called the airline and found out that they had been canceled from my account, so they couldn't do anything about it. No surprise, it was Bonnie. I called her, angry. She answered as if nothing had happened. I shouted, "How dare you cancel my tickets?" She laughed and replied, "Oh yeah, I did, isn't it funny?" I lost my composure and yelled, "Would you care to explain?" She responded, "Okay, I hate to say this. I know you were messing things up and blah blah blah, but we can't have you on the trip. You're too controlling, and your negative attitude would ruin the vacation for everyone." She said she had discussed it with everyone, and the family agreed to leave me out. "You're not worth ruining our trip," she added. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The trip I had paid for and planned was now happening without me. My sister somehow convinced everyone that I was the problem, and they all agreed to move forward with it. At that moment, something inside me broke. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. I logged into my account and canceled her ticket. Then I rebooked it in my name and changed the account password so she couldn't access it or make any changes to the travel itinerary. I sent a message to the family group chat. Since Bonnie has decided that I'm not welcome on the trip that I paid for, I've canceled her ticket. If any of you want to stay with her, I'll be happy to cancel your tickets as well. The reaction was immediate. My brother called me right away and said he had no idea about Bonnie's moves. I told him about the argument I had with her, and he confirmed that she was making it up. He assured me that he never agreed to leave me out, and he was pretty sure our parents would never ban me from the trip I was paying for. It was a relief to know that at least he wasn't on Bonnie's side. While I was still talking to him, my parents called me, furious that I had canceled Bonnie's ticket. They accused me of being petty and vindictive, but I stood my ground. I explained that I had planned and paid for the trip as a gift to the family, and if they didn't want me there, I'd rather go on a solo trip. But I wasn't going to give this away and sacrifice myself. They confirmed that they never asked Bonnie to cancel my tickets, but they weren't happy that I canceled hers either. They wanted us all to go on this trip together. I told them I wasn't going to let her dictate the terms of my generosity. Bonnie, of course, was furious. She sent me a flurry of angry messages, calling me every name in the book. I forwarded the messages to my parents to show them what their daughter was up to. My dad called me and offered to mediate the situation between us. He said he would include Bonnie on the call, and that she would apologize to me, and that I should rebook her ticket so we could all have a family vacation together. I wanted to resist this demand, but part of me knew that Bonnie would never apologize, so I just agreed to my dad's proposal. He added Bonnie to the call. She was too angry to realize it was a conference call. Dad told her that she was wrong to cancel my tickets, so she should apologize to me before we discussed anything else. She brusquely replied that she wouldn't apologize because she had done the right thing. We could both hear her say, "Apologize to that idiot, no way." Dad hung up the call. He had nothing more to say after that. I called him back and said, "Now do you see how cruel your daughter is? Or do you still want me to take her?" He stayed silent and said he was torn between two children. I know I did the right thing, but I feel sad that the trip won't be the same after this conflict. This isn't what I wanted. I imagined it would be a family trip, and no matter how I feel about Bonnie, she's still part of the family. My brother and I might not be affected, but my parents will definitely be upset by her absence. Update 1. The situation between Bonnie and me worsened after being excluded from the trip. She allied against me, trying to convince my brother to side with her. She proposed the idea of sponsoring the trip together so they could leave me out. He laughed at her suggestion, and asked if she had enough money to cover 50% of the trip expenses. She admitted she didn't have the money right now but promised to pay him as soon as possible. My brother shook his head in disbelief. We both knew she would never follow through. She doesn't have a steady job and frequently skips work when she's not in the mood. When she suggested going to Mexico instead of Hawaii, my brother burst out laughing, rejecting her offer to be the free photographer for their vacation. She hung up the phone and resorted to emotionally manipulating our parents so they wouldn't leave her out of the family trip. Thankfully, my parents stood firm this time, insisting that she apologize to me if she wanted to join us. My parents tried to convince me to be the bigger person and forgive Bonnie, urging me to take her with us. However, I remained steadfast. On the day of the trip, when I arrived at the airport to meet my family, my brother was the only one who was excited. My parents were still upset, but they had no choice but to accept that Bonnie wouldn't be joining us. As we boarded the plane, there was tension in the air, and I could see the disappointment in my parents' eyes. When we arrived in Hawaii, I took charge of the planning and made sure everyone had a good time. We enjoyed a private luau, snorkeling adventures, and even a helicopter tour of the island. Despite the initial unease, we began to relax and enjoy ourselves. Gradually, my parents started to accept that this was still a family vacation, even without Bonnie. Throughout the week, I received sporadic messages filled with anger from Bonnie. Her texts were full of accusations, and even my parents started to see that her behavior was unreasonable. We returned from the trip with plenty of fresh memories and amazing experiences. Hawaii had a way of dissipating the tension. Although my parents were still disappointed that Bonnie wasn't there, they appreciated the effort I had put into making the trip memorable. Bonnie blocked me on social media and was furious with our parents for choosing me over her. She expressed a desire to cut ties with them, but she couldn't do so because she lived in their house. She called my brother a freeloader for supporting me and said she never wanted to see me again. It was painful, but I knew I had done what I needed to do. I don't regret standing up for myself and setting boundaries, but I do wish things had turned out differently. Maybe someday Bonnie will realize she was on the wrong side, and we can mend our relationship. Until then, I'll hold on to the memories of that incredible trip. Update 2. Here's another update on the saga with my sister. Some time has passed since these incidents, but I finally found the time to update you here. After returning from the trip, I went back to work and had to work overtime to make up for my absence. I didn't talk to my parents right away about Bonnie, but I knew she must have been throwing tantrums at them for enjoying the trip without her. To make her feel worse, my brother and I flooded social media with family photos. It was quite amusing. About 3 months later, I visited my parents and noticed that Bonnie's room was empty. I asked about her and learned that they had finally made her leave. Well, not exactly kicked her out, but they asked her to move out. She wasn't taking her life or career seriously, frequently skipping work without reason. Since she didn't have any rent or food responsibilities, she didn't take things seriously. A year ago, my parents demanded that she pay rent for living in their house. Initially, she was furious and called them mean and greedy. When Dad threatened to evict her, she agreed to pay rent, but in a year, she only managed to pay 3 months. Every month, she found a new excuse not to pay. As expected, after my parents returned from the trip, she exploded. They tried to calm her down and even brought her gifts, but she threw them in their faces. Finally, Dad had had enough of her superior attitude. He told her to pack her things and he would drive her. Her behavior changed immediately. She started sobbing, hugged Mom, and said she acted this way because she missed them and was hurt because we left her alone. Mom replied that she had brought this on herself and that they didn't intend to leave her out. Her narcissistic behavior forced them to make this decision. She acted like she was crying, promising to pay rent every month. However, my parents had already given her enough time to change, but she remained the same narcissistic person. This time, they didn't give in to her manipulations and kicked her out of the house. Dad found a small apartment for her and even paid 2 months' rent. I didn't like how everything was handed to her on a silver platter, but it was better than letting her live at home for free. Although they were still worried about her well-being, kicking her out was the best way to make her more self-sufficient. What they didn't know was that she was tough to deal with. Mom called me a week ago and gave me the latest news about Bonnie. Dad covered 2 months' rent for her while she was moving out. Mom gave her ready-to-eat food and snacks that lasted about a week. After that, she started stopping by my parents' house, staying until dinner time. Mom had to offer her food, and she even started spending the night occasionally. At first, they tolerated it, thinking she was homesick. However, after a while of this behavior, they decided to confront her. Bonnie confessed that she had stopped paying rent and was hiding from the landlord. She hadn't paid any rent during the 2 months she lived in the apartment. Everything was with Dad's money. When Mom asked what she had done with her salary, she said she bought shoes for work. Mom offered to lend her money to cover the rent, but she refused, insisting on returning home. Mom asked Dad to intervene, and he stood firm, saying there would be no more help. He was fed up with her manipulative tactics, and if she asked for help again, they wouldn't open the door. I thought Dad's response was a bit harsh, but I understood his frustration. He had done enough for Bonnie. She sought help from my brother, saying she couldn't ask me because it would feed my ego and make her feel like a loser. My brother refused to get involved financially. He even asked her to let me lend her money indirectly through him. He refused to keep it a secret from me, which made her furious. She became bitter towards him, calling him my bootlicker and my pet that runs after me for free food. I took these stories with caution, but her arrogant behavior had reached its peak. Someone had to confront her. I'm glad I was the first to stand up to her and exclude her from the trip. I still remember how my parents reacted and tried to twist the situation to include Bonnie. I'm relieved that my parents finally realized how toxic Bonnie was and how she used her role as a daughter to manipulate them. For now, that's all. Thanks for interacting with my post. If there are more updates about my sister's situation, I'll share them in the thread. Update 3. I'm making this update 4 weeks after the last one to tell you that I saw Bonnie. It's not that I wanted to, but that's how things are with my sister. It happened when I got home on a Thursday from work, extremely tired. There she was, standing at the door, waiting for me. It was a rainy and cold day, and I don't know how long she had been standing outside the door, but she looked miserable. As soon as I saw her, I didn't know what to say, so I gave her a hesitant, "Hello?" She was a bit more energetic, so I knew it wasn't going to be good. She tried to hug me and said, "How have you been, little brother?" I just stood there with my things in hand while she hugged me. When I finally managed to break free from her, I opened the door to the house because I didn't want to keep getting wet, but I didn't think to tell her she wasn't welcome. Besides, she practically pushed me and entered without even waiting for me to go in first. When I took off my coat and work things, I asked her what she wanted. She said it had been a while since we saw or talked to each other, so she wanted to stop by and say hello. I told her to cut the crap and tell me the real reason she was there. So she put on that sad face she always used with my parents and told me she had nowhere to live. Her landlord had finally evicted her after she had fallen behind on rent for a few weeks, which I knew was a lie because my mother had told me she hadn't paid for several months. And the landlord had only received my dad's money. I told her no, so her second tactic was to pressure me to talk to my parents or my brother to help her, saying I wasn't being a good brother, but at least I could find it in my heart to help her not end up on the street. I told her I wasn't going to do any of that, and that if she wanted to at least earn our parents' favor, she should get her life together. Maybe when they see she's become responsible, they might want to forgive her. But my answer didn't sit well with her because she was probably expecting something different from me. She started calling me all sorts of names, saying I was a bad brother, that just because I had money and a good job, I thought I was superior, and that the rest of the family only liked me because I paid for things like the trip. It's funny because that's the only thing I've ever paid for them in my entire life. Anyway, I told her I had heard enough from her and that if she had dried off enough after being in my home for a while, it was time for her to get back out into the cold, wet night. I knew she had more to say, some insult, but I told her it was better for her to leave on her own, or I'd have to kick her out by any means necessary. You can imagine she didn't like my ultimatum at all. Finally, when she left, I blocked her from everywhere. I hadn't needed to do it before since she never contacted me again after the trip, but I'd rather not take any chances now. Where she's staying or what she's doing now is something I can't know. She hasn't even spoken to my parents. So I hope this is the last update, or at least the next one is about her getting her life together. Update 4. Since many have asked for an update on where my sister is living, I'm back after 10 days to share what I know. First of all, that same night after visiting me, she went to my brother's house. She tried the same thing she did with me, but my brother refused to let her in, so she ended up leaving. From what I know, because my mom has been talking to her during this time, she's gone to live with a friend or coworker. I don't know what the dynamic is between the two of them, but I feel sorry for her friend. I mean, it can't be anything good to have a parasite living with you. But as I said, I only updated because people asked, but it's not like I care much. So I think this will be my last update.